How to Read Guitar Music, Part B, Introduction. If you've been following this course, you'll be aware that Part A was how to read music rhythm, and this lesson is an introduction to Part B, where we'll learn how to read the notes off the stave. If you've missed Part A, you can find the playlist link down below in the description, and there you've got all the lessons that made up Part A. You can also access the complete How to Read Music for Guitar course at ebooks4guitar.com, and it's completely free to go through and view online. In this introduction, we're going to go through a lot of information, and fairly quickly. But because it is an introduction, there's nothing you need to memorise, and there's no homework. We're literally just laying a foundation out so you know what we're going to be looking at in the next section of the course. Right, let's take a quick look at the elements of the stave. And some of the elements we've already looked at. At the very beginning of the stave is the treble clef. And all the music we've done so far has been in treble clef. And all the music we'll be doing on from here will be in treble clef. However, just so you're aware, there are other clefs. There's the bass clef, which is fairly common, and the C clef, which moves around. And what we'll be learning in this particular course, and how we read music off the stave, only applies to treble clef. So stick with treble clef for the time being. The next thing you'll notice on the stave is the key signature. And the key signature tells us what scale the tune is based in. But we'll look at this in far more detail later. The last element on this particular stave is the time signature. And hopefully you already understand the time signature, because we've done this in a fair amount of detail through the first part of the course. Right, because we'll be using the treble clef, let's take a closer look at it. And the treble clef is sometimes called the G clef, and that's because this is the note it's based around. And you'll see the big curl at the bottom centres on the G. And if you had to, you could work out all the other note names from that G line. With all music, each line and space represents a note. So if we were to look at that G line, next to it up one would be A, the space, then the line up from that is B, then the space up from that is C, then the line up from that is D, and so on. So in treble clef you can use a couple of handy catchphrases to help you remember the names of the notes on the stave, and one is faces in the spaces, and if you see the spaces are F, A, C, E. Faces in the spaces. And for the lines, I was taught every good boy deserves fruit or football. E, G, B, D, F. Or you could just work it out alphabetically from the E. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. So when you see a note on the stave, it takes the name of the line or space it's sitting on. In this case, it's sitting on a D note, so this is a D. Now, if we bring all that we've learnt together, that is the rhythms we've previously learnt, and we took the shapes of those notes and put them on the lines, you can see we've got the name of the note and how long it should last, which is all the elements we need to be able to play the tune. Now, there's just one more slight complication, which we'll go into in far more detail in a later lesson. However, we'll just touch on now, and that is the key signature. The key signature is a series of sharps or flats that appears between the treble clef and the time signature. And the key signature is really important because it actually changes what the lines and spaces mean. In that, if there's a sharp or a flat on a particular line or in a particular space, that note should be played sharp or flat right the way through the tune, unless it tells you not to. So, looking at this example, it's got an F sharp and a C sharp. One's a space, one's a line. And this is the key of D major. And in the key of D major then, every time you play an F, it should be F sharp, and every time you play a C, this should be C sharp. Again, just to emphasize, you don't have to understand this now. I'll do a complete lesson on key signatures during this part of the course, so don't worry if you don't get it. Right then, very briefly, we've established that the stave not only contains the rhythm for the tune, but what notes you should play. However, we've only established the note names and not where they are on the guitar. So next, we'll go through a lesson that I actually made a long while ago, where we learn how to memorize the names of the notes on the guitar. And even though the next part of the lesson is about memorizing the notes on the guitar, you don't have to do that. As long as you get a basic understanding of how the notes work and how they're named, that'll be good. You'll actually learn how to name all the notes on the guitar, string by string, slowly, lesson by lesson, as we go through this next part of the course. And that's the way music's been taught for years, and I think it's the most successful way of learning it. Right then, here's the lesson. Memorize all the notes on the guitar in 4 easy steps. Before starting on the 4 steps, you need to know the absolute basics of note naming. The notes are named from A to G, and these note names are simply repeated where necessary. For example, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. The first slight complication that needs to be remembered is that the gaps between the notes aren't all uniform. The B and C and the E and F are closer than all the other notes. Or, to put it another way, what's actually going on is there's a tone gap between each of the notes, except B and C where there's a semitone and E and F where there's another semitone. So, looking at this on the neck of a guitar, you can see there's a gap between A and B, C and D, D and E, F and G and A. Another way of looking at this would be in terms of intervals or semitones. You can see there's a pattern here. The pattern is 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2. So if you think of each interval or semitone as a fret, it becomes pretty easy to understand. This is a universal musical pattern, and it can be seen most clearly on a keyboard or a piano. The familiar pattern on any piano or keyboard of black and white keys arises as a direct result of the distribution of the notes. Notice on a keyboard how the E and the F and the B and the C don't have a black note between them, whereas all the other notes that have an extra semitone between them have a black note. So to simplify all this, you need to remember the notes E and F and B and C are always right next to each other. There's no empty fret between them. Step 1 in learning the names of the notes on a guitar is to learn the names of the open strings. The name of the open strings, going from thickest to thinnest, are E, A, D, G, B and E. And you can remember these by using a simple saying. Here are 3. Every angry dog growls and bites eventually. Or, Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie. Or, elephants and dogs, God blesses everything. Just a quick subnote here. The bottom E string is the thickest string, and the top E string is the thinnest string, and they're named according to their tone and not according to their position. So the top E string has a very high pitch, and the bottom E string has a very low pitch. And how you choose to memorize the strings is entirely up to you. I've now heard loads of different sayings that different people have made up to help them with the process. When memorising the names of the open strings, you're also memorising the names of the notes on the 12th fret. This is why many guitars have a double dot or an accented marker on the 12th fret, because it's an octave above the open strings. I'll explain octaves later in this tutorial. The next step is to memorise the name of the notes on the bottom E string. Even if you don't want to learn to read music or don't want to study theory, it's important that you know the names of these notes. E-shaped bar chords and many of the scales get their names from the bottom E string. The notes on the bottom string then, starting with the open E, are E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. We stop on the 12th fret because the pattern repeats itself. Notice the B and the C are next to one another. Also, not so obvious, but the E and the F are also close to one another. By learning the names of the notes on the bottom E string, you're also learning the name of the notes on the top E string. So now you've mastered the names on 2 strings of your guitar. The next step is to memorise the name of the notes on the A string. This is the last string you need to memorise the name of the notes on, but it's also an important one for other reasons other than reading music and theory. Right, the name of the notes on the A string then, including the open string, are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Again, notice the B and C are next to one another, and here more clearly the E and the F are next to one another. Once you've memorised the names of the open strings and the names of the notes on the E string and the A string, you know half of the notes on the guitar, and the rest can be worked out using octaves. An octave is the name given to the gap or the interval between 2 notes with the same name. So you can have an octave up or an octave down. An octave occurs then anywhere the note repeats itself, for example from A to A. It's also common to refer to multiple octaves. For example, if the A repeats twice, then you have a 2-octave gap or interval. If you prefer to think about this in a technical or scientific way, the octave is the point at which the frequency doubles or halves. So if you were to take a fixed note or frequency as a reference note, an octave up from this would be double the frequency, and an octave down from this would be half the frequency. And every time you doubled or halved the frequency from the new points, it would be up or down another octave respectively. From what you've learnt already, that is the open strings, the E string and the A string notes, we can find all these other notes using octaves. And to do this, all you need to do is remember a pattern, that is 2-2, or 2 strings up, 2 frets up. What this means in practical terms is, if you take any of the notes you've learnt so far, and then go 2 strings up, 2 frets up, from that point, the note repeats, an octave up. For example here, the G, which is the 3rd fret on the bottom E string, repeats an octave up, which is the 5th fret on the D string. And this rule is true of any of the notes on the bottom E string. 2 strings up, 2 frets up will always produce the octave up. And when this is applied, it means now you know nearly all the notes on the D string without having to memorise them. And because this rule applies to the A string, you know nearly all the notes on the G string. The pattern doesn't have to stop here, however. We can take it up another octave to learn the names of most of the notes on the B string. To do this, we have to learn a second pattern, which goes from our 2nd octave, which is 2 strings up, 3 frets up. So, for example, from our original G in the 3rd fret of the bottom E string, we found 1 G an octave up in the 5th fret of the D string and a 2nd G 2 octaves up on the 8th fret of the B string. This pattern also works from the A string, so you can use it to confirm any of the notes on the top E string that you're not 100% sure of. Okay, let's see this done on a guitar. Firstly, we play the G on the bottom E string, so that'll be the 3rd fret of the bottom E string. Then, to find the octave up from there, we go 2 strings up and 2 frets up, and this is the octave up from the G. Now, if we go 2 strings up and 3 frets up from here, we have the 2nd octave. So let's see that again a bit more quickly. The G, 2 strings, 2 frets, then 2 strings, 3 frets. To summarise then, the 4 steps are: Step 1, learn the names of the open strings. Step 2, learn the names of the notes on the bottom E string. Step 3, learn the name of the notes on the A string. And step 4, learn the octave patterns. By following these 4 steps, you'll know all these notes and more. You might have noticed at this point that there are a couple of notes missing on the B string. That's because these notes can't easily be found using this technique. However, using some basic information you've learnt from this tutorial, you can find those notes now quite easily. And that is that the B and C are always 1 fret apart, and the C and D will always be 2 frets apart. You now have the names of all the notes on the guitar except the sharps and flats. So, for the next part of this lesson, let's take a look at sharps and flats and how to understand them. The sharp symbol looks like a hash or a blank game of noughts and crosses, and the flat symbol looks like a small b. In fact, on many websites, the small b is used as a flat symbol because they are so similar. A sharp is a semitone up, and a flat is a semitone down. On a guitar, a semitone is a single fret, so a sharp would be 1 fret up, and a flat would be 1 fret down. So, let's illustrate this on a guitar to make it perfectly clear. We'll start with the sharp. The first thing we need to do is define what is up and what is down on a guitar. Moving up a fret or up the fretboard means moving towards the bridge or the tailpiece of the guitar. And moving down a fret or down the fretboard means moving towards the nut or the headstock where you tune the guitar. This is because we're talking about pitch now. So, when you move up the neck of the guitar towards the tailpiece, the pitch gets higher and higher and higher and is therefore moving up. Conversely, if you move down the guitar towards the headstock, it goes lower and lower and lower. Therefore, to move up the guitar is towards the tailpiece, and moving down the guitar is towards the headstock. So, looking at sharps and flats from a practical point of view, what it means is, if you get, for example, a G and move it up 1 fret, it will be G sharp. If you take an A and move that up 1 fret, it will be A sharp. Now, if you take the G and move it down a fret, it will be G flat. Same with A. If you take the A and move it down 1 fret, it will be A flat. This simple rule works in the vast majority of cases. So, for example, if you were looking for a B flat chord, you could use a first position bar chord. You'd select the B and then simply move it down a fret to make it B flat. Or if you prefer, you can take the second position B and move that down by a fret to create B flat. The same rule will work for sharps. So, if you were to get a G major in the 3rd fret and take it up to the 4th fret, it would become G sharp major. Also, if you were to take the A in the 5th fret and take that up to the 6th fret or up a semitone, and that would be A sharp. And this rule doesn't stop with the majors and the minors. If you were to take, for example, an F minor 7th in the 1st fret and take it up by a fret to the 2nd fret, it would be F sharp minor 7th. And this rule even applies to scales. So if you know the G major scale, which starts on the 3rd fret, if you play the same scale but starting on the 4th fret, it would be a G sharp major. Or if you take the same scale and start it on the 2nd fret, it would be G flat major. Sharps and flats then are quite easy to understand, but there are one or two small issues that do cause problems. For example, overlapping notes. So to illustrate this, we'll take the 2nd fret, which is the F sharp, but also the same note is G flat. If you take the F up by 1 fret, it becomes F sharp, and that is in the 2nd fret. However, if you take the G down 1 fret, it becomes G flat. This is also in the 2nd fret. This means you can have one note or one chord with two potential names, and that name would be decided by the key signature, but this is a lesson for a later date. Another place where questions arise is in the gap between E and F and B and C, because there is no blank fret. But again, this is a question to be answered in a later lesson. In conclusion then, the sharps and the flats fill in the spaces between the main notes on the fretboard, and this then gives you a far greater knowledge of the fretboard as a whole. I realise that this lesson has gone through an awful lot of stuff very quickly, and there's no way you could remember it. But don't worry, you don't have to. We'll do it all again, piece by piece, as we go through the next part of the course. If you're new to the course or new to my channel, you might want to go back to the beginning of this course, which is called How to Read Guitar Music, and you'll find that in the playlists on my YouTube channel, or you can find it at www.ebooksforguitar.com, and you can see it all for free there. Also, if you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe and hit the bell icon, and then you'll be notified when I upload new lessons. Thank you very much for watching.